Everybody, Lieutenant Joe here for the Blue Heart Podcast. Now, I think the first thing you're going to say is, Lieutenant Joe, it's a little dark in there today. What's going on? It is a little dark. We're having a problem with one of our lights. But I think as long as you can see me and you can hear me, I think we're good. All right, so what I try to present on this program is to bring you training, interesting stories, uh, up-to-date things that are going on in the news, things that are of concern to you, the law enforcement officers, my brother and sisters out there doing the job today. So our program is brought to us by Blue 360 Media. They're my publishers. They're good. Riot Tint and Smart Tint, excellent. They make security film for windows in buildings and schools and everything. They're awesome. And medicalessentialdiagnostics.com. They take anybody who's a government employee in the state of New Jersey right now, state, local, first responders, all that. And you can go to them and you can get a full, complete health screening at no cost to you to find out there's something wrong so you can fix it. So you live through your thing, you collect your pension and do all that. All right, so when I look at what is it I want to talk about, and I say, should it be a lesson? Is there something big going on in the world of law enforcement? What is it we can look at? As I go through my list, I write a list of things down here. And I got to tell you, some of the things that we come across in the stories that I tell you are learning adventures for us because you never know when you're going to come across these things. So I was talking to someone the other day, and there were big departments in the room and small departments. And as I'm talking about it, one of the officers came up to me on a break and says, hey, Lieutenant, that stuff's never going to happen to us. We're kind of a small department. And I said, this is where you're wrong, my friend. Anything that happens in a big department can happen in a small department. All right. There's just less of it. That's really all it comes down to. You're going to have a homicide at some point. You're having a sexual assault at some point. You're going to have an arson at some point, even if you're a small, nice little town. Bigger cities have more people, therefore they have more of those events. So the key is you need to be prepared at all times because you never know when it's coming your way. So get trained and do the right thing. So what I liked, there was an officer who came to one of our courses and he pays for himself because his agency didn't have budget, they didn't have money, but he paid for himself. And just so you know, if you sign up for our courses and you're paying for yourself, you tell our office when you sign up, hey, I'm putting myself through this class. We have huge discounts for people that pay for themselves. All right, so pangarotraining.com is where you should go. All right, so I'm looking over my list here and I'm saying, I could tell you something emotional, I could tell you something good. How about a burglary ring? A burglary ring that took place in our town, and it was unique in the way the burglaries were committed. What made it unique was that the burglars did some things to deactivate the alarms that I don't think I would do. It looked pretty dangerous. So when I was a detective, I would get called out for all kinds of crime scenes, assaults, injuries, whatever. Well, I get called out one time. There was a burglary at this big computer facility. Now, if you think of it this way, it was a two-story house. I think it was like a colonial house. It was on a major road, and it had been converted to an office space. So this big computer technology place, they bought the house and then converted all the rooms in the house, every room in the house converted to a workspace. Some places had 2, 3 desks in them. They took out a couple of the walls and they had an open area where they had a bunch of cubicles and people working. And then private offices in some of the bedrooms were for the leadership or whatever. Well, they came to work and they thought it was strange that they get in the morning. It had snowed the night before. And they noticed that the lights and stuff that are normally on, the exterior lighting of the place, there was no lights on. It was all dark. And they looked around, they see, oh, those traffic lights are working. That's weird. So they go into their building. When they got into their building, they found randomly items of computer packages, equipment were stolen. Like they had some very high-end monitors, and those monitors were gone, but the floor standing computer was still there. And then in other people's work areas, everything was taken. And then in some of the offices, just the standing computer was taken. But when they totaled it all up, there was a ton of stuff missing. There had to be 30 workstations in this place, plus the offices, and they were missing more than half the equipment. So they call the police. The patrolman comes, takes a look, says, "Hey, call a detective." I come out and they're like, "We can't understand. We've been flipping the circuits and the power won't come back on." I said, "Okay, well, it had snowed. I'm going to go outside and take a look around and see if I see tire tracks, footprints. Did anybody leave anything behind?" To take this much equipment, and that was the first clue that I had, to take as much equipment as was taken. This wasn't one guy breaking in and then carrying all this stuff out on his back. I'm telling you, they took standing computers from, floor standing computers, terminals, they took all kinds of stuff. It had to go into a vehicle. So I said, maybe there's some tire tracks. Let me go see, because it had snowed and maybe you could see it. And then you could take some pictures. You could find out what kind of tires, and you start to develop your evidence, right? Well, I go outside, and yes, indeed, there are tire tracks. And you could see the tire tracks the way they came in, and they backed up right to the back door. You could see this big giant, looked like either a big van or some kind of a truck, had backed right up to the back door. Well, I continued to walk around, and when I got to the side of the building where the electricity came into the building, comes across the wires and hits the system and goes into the building's electric. The electrical wires had been cut. Looked like somebody had taken some kind of a cutting device, an axe or something, and chopped these wires, which cut the power, which also cut the alarms and all the other things. Now, I don't know how many of you have investigated burglaries where the bad guys cut the power, physically cut the power with an axe to stop the electric from flowing into the building. That's a dangerous thing to do. Do you want to hit live electric wires coming off the pole with an axe? No. So I knew this was unique. This was unique. And as it turned out, as you hear the story, as it turns out, it was a unique signature of these particular criminals, which in the long run helped us to identify all the jobs they did. And then when we had suspects to talk to them to get information about all the jobs and tie it all up. So I took my pictures, I documented everything, dusted for fingerprints, and it was funny. Didn't find one errant fingerprint where you think you would find them from criminals running all around this building, which told me another thing. They probably wore some kind of gloves. So you got somebody professionally cutting electric, that they know how to do that. Then they're wearing gloves, and they targeted this place. They came in, they took specific pieces of equipment. They didn't just take everything. These were people who had some insight, some knowledge into computers, into wiring. And what they did told me they were not just your average opportunity-based kind of burglar, right? They brought a truck and they took all this stuff. So if somebody's going to take all of that stuff, what are they going to do with it? They're going to put it on Craigslist? They're going to put it in a newspaper? Oh, I have all this computer stuff, and give themselves up? No. They have to be doing something. It's either it's been ordered, somebody wanted a particular kind of thing. How would they know it was even in there? Now, they saw outside computer, whatever, and if you looked in the window of the house on any of the first floor, you would have seen all the glowing computer screens, lots of them everywhere. So maybe they saw that, and that's why they decided to hit the place. Maybe they had other information. Maybe it was an inside job, either a current employee or a former employee or a friend of a current or former employee. You see, you start to develop your suspect base based on what you have in front of you. So now we know that these guys seem to be a little more professional than your average burglar. They seem to have targeted this location. They used pretty sophisticated tactics, even though, swinging a big axe at a power cable doesn't seem sophisticated. The reality is they knew how to do that, right? I wouldn't know how to do. I wouldn't go swinging an axe at a power cable. Not a shot, right? So I took all that stuff, and then we started our investigation. Now, what was interesting is that also taken of all this computer stuff was, believe it or not, a big boom box, a big radio about this big that had been sitting on a countertop in one of the offices. And it was, as they described it, very high end, beautiful music piece of equipment. Everybody listened to different music in the office, and this was in one of theirs, and they said this thing's expensive at the time. You're going back a little bit, but it was $600-700 for a boombox. It was a lot of money. So you start putting all these things together. So looking at the tire tracks, and of course I had to get the owner over there and say, hey, did you have anybody making a delivery yesterday that would have made these tire tracks? And they said no. When we closed up last night, it had not snowed yet, and everybody was out of here. So therefore, the tire tracks in the snow were indicative of the criminal's vehicle, because they all left and it hadn't started snowing. It snowed later in the evening. So we start to put our case together by looking at the facts at the scene. So if you go back in a previous episode, I talked about letting the crime scene talk to you. And this is one of the ways the crime scene talks to you. You start to look and see what you have in front of you, and then try and figure out what could be the reasonable explanations for what you have. So we had this, what we thought, obviously a high-end burglary job with some people with some skill, some ability, some knowledge, right? They took specific things. Like I said, they didn't take everything. So we start our investigation, and we put out a bulletin to all local towns. Hey, anybody else have anything like this? Well, wouldn't you know it? In the next town over, next town or two over, they had a similar kind of a burglary where somebody cut the power, went in and took a whole bunch of computer stuff. Interesting that they stole a truck in that job 2 nights earlier. They stole a van from the place that they broke in, another computer facility, stole tons of computer stuff, and a van as well. So you start to say to yourself, well, because they cut the power, there's a signature there. Who else is doing that? I had very few of those over the course of my career. So within close proximity, 2 towns away, got to be connected, right? At least you got to start with that idea. It's connected. So I got with that PD, and they put out an APB on the vehicle, a big white van. And funny enough, the next morning we get a phone call from a resident in our town in one of the nicer neighborhoods. We called it up in the hills. It was a hilly area, and they were up there. And they said, hey, there's this van been sitting out here on the cul-de-sac for 2 days now, and nobody knows who it is. It's got some name of some company on it from Wall Township, a computer company. How come the patrols didn't find it or notice it? I don't know. Would you notice that? I don't know. You'd think it's just a van there. So because we got that call, they sent a car up there. The patrolman did the right thing, ran the plates, comes back stolen out of this other location where they stole these computers. So now do you say to yourself, when was it stolen? Well, it was stolen the night after the job we had. So why would it end up in my town? Right? So if you got the same burglars, they hit my town, then they hit another town, a couple of towns over, stole a vehicle, stole all their computer stuff. Why would they dump the vehicle in my town? So there has to be some connection either to the immediate area or to the area in general. All right. So of course, we dust the van, we look for everything, no fingerprints that came up to anybody other than people who worked in the company, had legitimate reason to have their fingerprints in the van. And we thought that was pretty strange. Well, the break in the case actually came. Well, I'll tell you about the break in the case. But as it went, there were about 8 or 9 more of these kind of burglaries all over the Monmouth County, New Jersey area. Far away, 20, 30 miles away, close to us, East Coast, West Coast of the county, all over the place, all cutting the power, stealing lots of stuff, all computer stuff. So the break in the case comes when there was a place, it was a surf shop. It was a very high-end surf shop. It wasn't on the beach. It was in a Monmouth County town, and I can't remember the name of it, but they sold surfboards, they sold high-end sunglasses, they sold cool clothes, but all big money. And there was a burglary there. Somebody cut the power. They went in and they cleaned the place out. I mean, so much stuff that the teletype, and it was teletype at the time, teletype came out and said, about $40,000 worth of clothing, eyeglasses, surfboards, all kinds of stuff stolen, and the power was cut. And this is the second time this place has been hit. About 4 months earlier, somebody cut the power, went in and cleaned the place out. And I said, that's very, very interesting. Um, I called that town and I talked to them and they said, hey, listen, what didn't make it to the teletype is that all that stuff was cleaned out and we caught a guy hiding in the bushes. When we all went over there, we're doing our crime scene or whatever. Somebody sees somebody moving in the woods and they ran. The guy took off. They locked him up and he's from out of town and he had warrants and this and that. He's a burglar, but he knew nothing about the burglar. But there's no way he was near this location hiding in the woods. Now, why was he hiding in the woods? He didn't have a truck hiding in the woods. He didn't have all this stuff with him. So maybe he was a guy that got left behind. Maybe he was a guy doing something else. We didn't know, but there he was. And they said, and we put him in the county jail. We lodged him in the county jail. I said, okay, as an investigator, don't I need to talk to this guy? Don't I need to give it a shot? And I asked the detective from this other town, did you talk to him? He goes, nah, no sense talking to him. He told the patrols he had nothing to say. Did he ask for an attorney? I don't think so. I think he just said he wasn't saying nothing, so they booked him into the county jail. So I made arrangements for him to be brought to our department from the county jail. And I sat down with this guy, long and short of it, and we had a conversation. I advised him his Miranda rights. He thought he was pretty slick, thought he would get over on me. We started talking and talking and talking. And he gives up a name of some of his friends, some people that he lives with. Guess what? He lives in an apartment in our town. Okay. So what do? I dispatch detectives over to the house. They find another guy who lives there and they go in and they had a patrol officer with him, a uniform there. And they're standing there. And the patrol officer happened to be one of the guys that was at the burglary of the computer store in my town. And while the detective is talking to this guy who's really nervous and pretending he doesn't know nothing, the patrolman looks up and on top of the refrigerator is this big high-end boom box. And he remembers the name of it because he was there taking the original report. And he says, can I talk to you for a second, detective? I think that's the boombox from our thing. I mean, here's a guy doing burglaries. He lives with a guy. There's no such thing as coincidence. So long and short, we end up talking to that guy in that apartment. He had a warrant. I asked him, where'd you get the boombox? He got all nervous. He got all, oh, my friend brought it home a couple of days ago. I think he bought it in Asbury somewhere. I just, well, this guy had a warrant. We lock him up, bring him in. Well, under pressure, long story short, that guy starts to fold and says that his roommate is a burglar and he brought the boombox home. He goes, matter of fact, he has a really good partner named Kelly, a boy named Kelly, about 20 years old. And Kelly rents a house in my town. Now, 20 years old, how's he renting a house? And where the area where he was renting it was a high-end area. We're saying, how is that possible? He also tells us that the kid they caught in the woods behind the surf shop guy was lived in Eatontown, New Jersey, and he had a grow room there. He had a big grow room with Mylar and lights and all this kind of crazy stuff. And he gave all of this up. So what did we do? We talked to that kid again. He don't want to know nothing. We went out and we looked at the house in Eatontown, and we could see everything this kid told us. There's like a very, very large detached garage in the back. That's where he's growing marijuana. It's been going on for a while. And there was some boards on the side of the house that had Mylar stapled to them, like they were outside. They were removed. You could see Mylar. Mylar is used to reflect light in a grow house. Long and short of this story, we end up getting a search warrant, going in there and finding that it was a grow room, but it was empty. Hadn't been used for a little while, but all the equipment was there. The dirt was all there, but the plants were all gone. The kid's mother tells us, oh, he's living in this house in your town. So, of course, we sit mom down. She can't make any phone calls. We decide we're not going to get a search warrant. We're going to knock on the door of that house. So we go to the house where Kelly lives. We knock on the door. Kelly answers the door, lets us in. We start talking to him. He was a nice enough guy, but my partner standing there looking around while we're talking in this big living room. There's like 6 surfboards in the living room. There's about 7 or 8 pairs of Oakley sunglasses sitting on the kitchen table. So my partner does the right thing. He just kind of backs up while we're talking, and he's looking around in places he's allowed to be. And he looks down the hallway and he looks at me and he says, looks like you guys do a lot of computer work. Looks like there's a lot of computers down the hallway there. Well, with that, this guy, Kelly, I'm going to say he got nervous, but he was more concerned about something else in the house because the house stunk like raw marijuana. And he was like, oh, those, yeah, we have a computer business and this and that. So now I'm putting it all together. Here's all these surfboards, Oakley glasses, computers. These are our burglars. And they were storing the stuff here in town. That's why that truck was probably dumped in our town. They did the burglary. They dumped all the stuff in this house, drove it up there and dumped it, got a ride out of there so that they're not connected to it. That's what we believe. Well, I start talking to this kid, Kelly, and he was a nice enough guy. He was concerned about his girlfriend who was living there with him, and they were paying a ton of money for this house, and neither one of them had jobs, that kind of thing. Where's the money coming from? And that smell of raw marijuana was so overpowering that I mentioned it to him. I said, listen, I smell marijuana. Are you growing pot? Because your girlfriend's going to be in serious trouble if you are. His whole tone changed. He goes, listen, I don't want her to get in trouble. I am growing some pot. It's downstairs. I'll show it to you as long as she's not going to get in trouble. I said, well, what are we talking about? A couple of plants? If it's only a couple of plants, you could take the weight for it. I said, but if it's more than that, don't. He goes, no, no, no. As long as it's good, I don't want her to get in trouble. Let me show you. He takes us down there. The whole basement was a grow, right? The grow guy from Eatontown was buddies with this guy. He moved to this house over here. Now they're doing the grow here. There had to be 500 fully mature plants in the basement, cutting rooms. Unbelievable. And in the bedrooms upstairs, they were stocked to the ceiling with computers, Oakley glasses, surfing gear, everything that's been missing for all these different jobs, laptops. It was unbelievable. We ended up locking everybody up, taking all this stuff. I mean, it took us, I can't tell you how long to clean the house out. We had the strike force there. The county strike force had to come out because of all the drugs. We didn't know what else we were going to find here. We found some ecstasy pills. We found money. This kid was doing pounds a week he was growing. It was unbelievable. And all the stolen equipment. So once we found that out, the kid that I had talked to first, that we brought to our police agency, didn't want to say nothing. We talked to him again, and he waived his rights and he gave up the whole thing looking for help because I wanted to know where did all those computers go to? Who's fencing this stuff off? What are you doing with this, right? And what else is going on? Any other grow houses? So we kind of talked to him. We got the prosecutors involved and trying to work out a way for this kid to tell us what he knew. Well, he ended up giving the location where they were dumping all the computer stuff, and it was to a fence in Bayonne, New Jersey. And we found out where that location was. We got together with Bayonne PD. We got together with a couple other locations and took care of that end of it. So the long story here is that you never know what you're coming across. Okay. There's more to that story with Bayonne. I don't want to get into that right now. And it wasn't anything they did wrong. It was what the leadership in my agency did, dropped the ball on that end of it. But we found out where everything was going, and that led to a bigger investigation by the state police, who found out about the Bayonne people and tracked them to other places. Let's just say that at this point. But the bottom line, this started out as a very simple thing. There were some signatures to the crimes. They were unique. The investigation was done properly. The patrol officers did a great job recognizing, remembering things, and everybody worked together on this one. So you never know what's going to show up in your town. You never know what's going on at that house right up the street. All right. So I hope everybody enjoyed that story, and I hope you get something out of it to pay attention to every detail of what's going on in your town, because there is crime in your town that you don't know about, and the key is to pay attention and find it. All right, we'll talk to you the next time. Have a great day, everybody. It's Lieutenant Joe for the Blue Heart Podcast. Oh, yeah, and like and subscribe and tell your friends.